This is Spirit in Motion.
Today we're talking about purpose. I think we all understand without having to talk about it very much. We all desire to have purpose. We all want our life to count for something.
Yep.
What are the questions that you're getting from people about purpose? Because it's not easy. I mean, it's like, especially when you're young, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to the right place? Am I going to do?
Yeah.
I don't want to get, what is the fear when you're a kid? Or I think maybe your fear is just like, you're going to be 70 and be like, dang it, I went down the wrong road.
I think, what's interesting, Adam, is I think what's happening is, as we've become more prosperous as a society, and I think as death is, oddly enough, less of a thing or less likely a thing, or that I feel maybe that I'm not in survival mode, let's say it that way. I think then you really do kind of shift over into maximizing your life. I think when it's like, are we going to survive the winter? Will all the kids make it this winter, right? Tragic as that is, but that was like reality just 150 years ago.
Yeah, so we don't live in the old, we're not cowboys.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, Dad probably isn't going to die of smallpox this winter, or one of the kids. Then you start to wonder about, it's a lot less about survival. Think about even just, the Great Depression. That was just, 80 years ago.
Yeah.
So, when you're thinking a lot less about survival, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the Korean War, all of these things. I mean, again, I think you kind of shift over into this, let's make my life count.
Yeah.
And I think so we're living, and so a lot of the questions that I'm getting are really centered around this idea of how do I make it count? I really want to live my best life. Again, you can't even really have that conversation or be thinking that way when you're trying to survive today. You're just not even thinking about how can I have my best life? You're thinking about just make it to tomorrow. But because we've been relatively prosperous, actually ridiculously prosperous as a nation.
And we're specifically talking Western culture.
For sure. Then I think you start to ask these more, how do I make everything count? So I'm hearing those questions, especially from a lot of younger people who live with a lot of pressure to be themselves, to live their best life, to pick the right career, to do something that's really fulfilling.
Where are they hearing it from?
Well, I think, I think it's probably, maybe partly natural human nature, just based on some of the things that I'm talking about. When I'm not in, fear for my life, then I can really start to think about, and I kind of have the mental real estate to think about some other things.
Got it.
But then I also just think it's part of how God's wired us. I mean, I think we want our lives to matter and count. That's what you were talking about, is that's human nature. I want to have purpose. You want to have purpose. I want my life to mean something. I want to leave some kind of mark.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I think social media probably exacerbates this though too, which then kind of, gives you a display of like what your life could be like, what your house could be like, what your relationships could be like.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? Because we see this like the week that we're recording this is the week that Bill and Melinda Gates have just announced that they're getting a divorce. And it's interesting to me, and this is not just them, and I'm not judging them, I don't know their story, but it's fascinating how you get these kind of very public relationships that seem like, just from a distance, you have all you have is your imagination, and then come to find out they're not happy at all or whatever, and it's not working. It's like, oh wow, I kind of put them in a different category or whatever. I think social media kind of exacerbates that and gives us this image, this picture, this longing for a very idealized life.
Oh, how many times I've gone to a party, walked in the door of my friend's house, and I was just having a fight with my wife.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And, from their perspective, this is great.
I thought you were going to say, and I walked in the door and the house was nothing like the pictures they posted on Instagram.
No. I hope I don't think I get in trouble from Dad for saying that. But yeah, it's a good example.
Right.
Yeah. How many times do your friends get a divorce or acquaintances and you're like, whoa,
I thought you guys were happy.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. What do you tell people to do? I mean, really, that's what people want, right? What am I supposed to do, especially as a pastor?
Yeah, how do I? Well, I mean, what do with what? Like how to have
a purpose? Like
how to have
what am I supposed to do? Is that what people are? I mean, what are people asking you?
Well, I think the main question I'm getting is I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to screw up my life. So I think there's a lot of pressure put on. Do I choose this direction or that direction?
Yeah.
Is this the relationship or not? And there's all of this. It's so different. I was just at lunch with a friend and we were talking about, when I'm 21, 22 years old, like I'm just not, I just like get started with life. Go ahead and, there's a job, fine, I'll take it. I spent very little time thinking about what I really wanted to do with my life.
That's you.
That's me.
Okay.
But I think that's shifted. I actually think that's kind of generational. I think there's less of that. I think there's more pressure put on young people today to have those things figured out, and maybe even feeling like there are more options. So I started out in life as an artist, and I did that because my dad said, "Whit, I think you've got some creative gifts." I had no clue, So I remember being in high school and thinking, "Okay, I'm going to graduate, and hopefully I go to." My dream was to play in the NBA. That wasn't panning out.
Mine too.
Right. So then what am I going to do? And my only concept of work, and I had worked before. I had worked for my dad, so it's not like I was unaccustomed to labor. But my
landscaping, that
sort of
thing.
Well, no, I'd worked at his ministry, like in the shipping department, where it was packaging products and sending them out or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But my concept of work as like a career involved a suit. You wore a suit.
Oh wow.
I needed a briefcase.
You're like Kramer with crackers.
I had no idea what would be in the briefcase. Oh yeah, and this is my other thought. I thought I would be working on a computer. So I could, like, if I close my eyes, this sort of ridiculous image that I had in my head was, so I'm wearing a suit, I've carried a briefcase to work, and I'm typing at a computer. I have no idea what I'm doing. What I'm accomplishing. This is just my visual.
You don't even know what the business is that you're.
No clue.
Awesome.
Just work, right? So when I get done with high school, my dad says, "Hey, come and work for me," because I wasn't great in high school and I wasn't sure if college was going to be a good idea. And so I did landscaping for a little while. That was miserable. And so he said, "Hey, I think you've got a creative, kind of gift." And so I just started in that. That led to me being a graphic designer and to being a musician, filmmaker, a lot of things like that. But what's interesting is this, Adam, this is my point. None of those things were options, like real options for like in my class.
Yes.
Now, granted, I only had 33 people in my graduating class. So
you graduated when?
Relatively small school, 94.
Okay.
But of the 33 of us, I can't remember. There wasn't one person. No one wanted to be a photographer. Mm-hmm. No one was going to be a designer.
Oh, wow.
No one had any dreams to be a musician. Mm-hmm. There was nothing like that. Like no one. Those were not options. But today, you could be a filmmaker. You could be an artist. You could have your own camera. You've maybe made your own movies if you wanted to.
Work for yourself.
You could totally work. Yeah, that wasn't even an option. It was just like, what are you going to do? Are you going to, the jobs were just much different. So today there's all of these whole fields of opportunity available. Am I this? Am I this? And so I think people are facing choice anxiety over the mass of options, and they want to choose the right thing. I think that's what I'm hearing. The problem is that we're putting way too much on self-actualization and not nearly enough emphasis on being faithful to what God's put in front of me to do right now.
That's great. First, I don't know what the heck self-actualization means.
So self-actualization is basically the realizing of all your potential. Mm-hmm. So right now, I've been following Dogecoin. Are you familiar with this?
I've taken a few trips with our friend Andrew.
Yes. Okay. So Andrew got me into this.
This is your brother-in-law,
right? Back in December. Hey, this is could be fun to invest in. So I invested a chunk of change in this. Not money I could afford to lose, but I'm like, let's try it.
Yes.
So it made me some money, and then somewhere in March, April, we said, okay, let's pull it out. I think we've made enough, and who knows what this is going to do. had I left that, it was $1,000 investment. Had I left that in, as of today, right now, it'd be worth 18 grand. Yeah. I made like $400. So
I hope we start the podcast with this story.
So here's the deal. Self-actualization is the idea that it's like the frustration that you feel around, I could have done so much more. Like, look at what that could have been every day to torture myself. I have the original amount still in an app that tells me what it would be worth. And I just refresh it and just look at it and get angry with Andrew and with me. And I'm just like, crud, think of what it could have happened. So anyway, I think self-actualization is something a little bit like that. It's this idea that you've got potential in you and a dream and some gifts, and it's up to you to make all that happen. The last thing you want to do is come to the end of your life and be going, man, why did I work at that dead-end job for 30 years? Or why did I chose this career path, but the problem was that career path ended up, way off and left field from what I really wanted to do. And so it wrecked 10 years of my life, and I've only got so long. And so it's all about maximizing potential.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's rooted, by the way, in what we talked about on identity in the first season, which is that you've got to realize all this potential about yourself. There's something really unique and special in you, which is true to some degree. And the purpose of life is to become who you really are. And that's also the same idea as self-actualization.
We focus too much on self-actualization, and we don't focus as much as we should on our relationship with God.
You could say we focus way too much on realizing our potential and not nearly enough on doing the next thing that God's asked me to do.
Why does that matter?
Well, because it's two different ways of living.
And this is if you're a Christ follower. If you're not, this isn't an option yet.
Well, it doesn't matter, I guess. What would it matter? If you're not a Christ follower, what does it matter what God thinks of you?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I was starting from the same foundation. Like, this is starting from a place of, I believe in Jesus. I'm following Jesus. Yes. This is where we're going.
Yeah, let's assume that.
Whit's kind of laughing at me in the studio. As if yes, this is who we're talking to.
Yeah, sure. So what was the question again?
The question is, why does it matter? Following God. That's self-actualization versus...
Yeah, so and it really does have everything to do with your faith. It really does have everything to do with the way that you see the world. Gosh, there's so many things connected to this. I could go about 5 different places, but let's just try to knock out the answer to your question. So if God is God and I'm made for God,
yes,
then my life is not my own.
That's a pretty big deal.
Right. So if my life is not my own, then me realizing all of my potential there's two ways you could look at it. You can look at it through the lens of stewardship, which is, this was given to me, I better take care of it. Or you can look at it through the lens of self-actualization, realizing your potential, which is, look at who I am, now let me maximize all of that. Where it gets really interesting I think for everybody, but maybe especially Christians, is that when you view your life as your own, then God becomes kind of this coach, this cheerleader he's
your co-pilot.
He's beside you going, come on, you can do it, like somebody helping you finish the marathon.
Wow.
Rather than someone that I'm looking to going, what's next? Where do you want me to go next? So there's a real difference in that. Yeah. So a couple verses come to mind here. One of them is the Lord's Prayer, which is in that prayer that Jesus instructs us to pray is, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. He also speaks about daily bread and this idea of daily nourishment. But in that same sense, it's like I'm returning to God as he did to get instruction on what's next. What is it that you want from me today? So it's a very humble posture.
Yeah.
I think it's in 1 Peter, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 1 Peter where Peter writes, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, so that in due time you may be exalted. The idea is that like I'm submitted to God. So I am made in the image and likeness of God. That does mean I have unique value, and it does mean I have gifts. And I think I'm responsible for stewarding those, but for God, not how I would want to use that for my entire life.
We talked about this in the identity issue, but the verse that can be misunderstood is delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart.
Right.
But there's a little bit of a different spin that we don't always.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's the idea that when I delight myself in the Lord, this is the thing about delighting yourself in the Lord is that your desires start to shift.
Yeah.
Delight yourself in the Lord doesn't mean do God things, do spiritual things, do Jesus things, and then he'll give you what you really want. That's a way different thing.
That's a different God.
Yeah. So it'd be like if I said, with my wife, Heather, delight yourself in Heather, and she'll give you the desires of your heart in a sense, when I think of it in that sort of relationship, it's like, I'll get the most of Heather. I'll get who she really is. I'll get the fullness of who she is when I'm leaned into her rather than just trying to get her to give me what I want really all along, which is a rather selfish approach.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a really big deal to say that I am going to give myself over to God.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly right. So the whole idea is, and this is the problem, that a lot of people are comfortable believing in Jesus as a reality, but have no...
That's a mental assent.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, yes, I believe he was a real person. Yes, I believe he died on the cross. Yes, I believe that he was raised from the dead. Okay, great. Take me to heaven. Now, help me live my life. So there's this really interesting quote that John Piper says that I think is really interesting. He says something to this, I'm approximating this, but he says, people who would be happy in heaven if God were not there will not be there. In other words, if God is not my delight, in other words, if I can envision a heaven where I can fly, I can walk through walls, there's no pain, there's no sickness, I can do whatever I want to do, and I'm having a blast. And God could be there or not, take it or leave him. That's not heaven.
It's also apparently your vision from the Avengers in that example.
What are you talking about?
Well, he could walk through walls and he could
vision.
fly.
Oh, I thought you were talking about I had a vision. No, you're talking about the Vision character.
Yes, the Vision. Yeah, Paul Bettany.
Yeah. So the idea is that in other words, your life is like, he says it this way: the gospel is not a way to get people to heaven. The gospel is a way to get people to God.
Oh man.
So the idea is that like God is God's the goal, not the cheerleader or the coach beside you trying to get you to your goal or your dream or your whatever. The great news is that God's not capricious. God's not toying with you. God wants the very best thing for you more than what you want for yourself. He wants a happiness and a fulfillment for you. I think that the struggle, we've talked about this lately, I think the struggle that so many of us have is, do I really believe that? Like, do I really trust that if I gave my life to God, that things would be better? Or do I think my life would be miserable and boring?
Yeah, we were talking about that on Tuesday. I shared a story with you that Diana, my wife, and I are in a season where we are really looking at what we are giving all of our time to. And it's a pivotal moment. We have a kid. We're going to have another kid soon. And she is asking me to look at things that I'm doing and consider laying them down. And that's hard. That's hard for me.
Yeah.
Because if I lay them down, will I live a boring life?
Right.
I don't believe that's true. It doesn't change that it's a fear.
Yeah, exactly. I think we all fear that.
I believe in God. I trust him wholeheartedly. I believe that God is good.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the fact that I feel this way.
Yeah, true. Me too. And I think that's why trusting God is a lot harder than going, okay, do I believe in Jesus? Check. Do I believe he rose from the dead? Check. Okay, heaven, great. I think it's so much more significant than that. Really trusting God with your desires and your dreams is one of the biggest asks that I think you can go through. But that's really what's aligned to what we're talking about when we're talking about purpose is we're talking about trusting God with your future. And that's terrifying.
Is that what you did, just practically, work-wise and vocationally? Is that what you were doing? And maybe it's not, but just like to answer your father's request to be an artist or to work in artistry and to take the next step and to follow that. I mean, you weren't at the beginning like, you know what, pastor, that's where I'm going.
Not at all. So here's a great story that kind of helps, I think, illustrate this. So when I was 21, 22, somewhere in there, I was heavily into music, kind of figured I would be a musician, or that was like my dream. And I just kind of created this band and had some guys that I was playing with regularly and practicing. And I had all these dreams of being famous. They were youthful, honestly stupid, kind of self-centered dreams, but they were my dreams nonetheless. I really was looking at these as something that would be wonderful to have this. At the same time, I was working at the church. I was a graphic designer for our youth ministry and was really learning and growing in that arena. And so I was still living at home at the time. And I was really getting excited about this band. We'd not done anything, played nowhere, had nothing going. There were no promising leads. I just was really excited about this. And I remember telling my parents, announcing to the family, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm passionate about. This is my dream. Now, keep in mind, I was raised where, I couldn't listen to non-Christian music. My parents had softened up by the time I was in my 20s, and it wasn't that awkward to talk to them about this, but to announce to my dad, who's a pastor, and my mom and all of this, that I'm going to go be in a band and whatever that means, and it won't be like a worship band, it'll just be a band.
I didn't know that part.
I had no desire to play Christian music. I just wanted to make cool music. I wanted to be cool and famous. That was my dream.
Oh, okay.
And do it with music. And so I announced to them that this is what I'm going to do. And I could tell my dad didn't love the idea. A couple days later, we're at work. He calls me down to his office. Now, he's got, 100 employees at this time. I didn't work directly for him. I had another boss. So for me to meet with him during the day, especially in his office, was significant. So I remember going down and sitting in this, armchair in front of, he's behind his desk, and I'm, in this, it's very formal conversation in a way that was uncomfortable as a 20, 21-year-old son and father. But he just says, Whit, listen, he says, I feel like what we're doing here at the church and this work is too important for you to approach it with halfway, like a half heart. And I can see that your heart is for music. He said, so I need you to decide if you really want to go pursue that, go do it. And have the courage and guts enough to go for it and resign here and go pursue that dream. But don't take from the church and really be wishing you could do something else. So I need to know whether or not you want to be here. And I was devastated. I remember walking back to my office. I hit my knees. I'm in tears, It was so hard because I thought, wow. And, first thoughts are, this is wildly unfair. How dare you ask me to lay down a dream? Why are you taking this so seriously? Why get so worked up about something that, I'm not even doing anything. I'm just practicing with a band. But, I knowing my dad, I knew he wasn't going to change his mind. This was the way that it was. I had to make a choice. I hit my knees to pray and say, okay, God. And I didn't pray that much at that time. And I could tell you, I wasn't really living my life for Jesus at that point. Not really fully. But I hit my knees to pray and say, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And I knew immediately, don't leave. I need to stay here.
How did you know that?
I just knew it. It was just a sense. It wasn't like a voice. I just knew when I envisioned my life, okay, here's my 2 weeks notice or whatever. I didn't feel good about that. I just knew that would be a bad move. And I thought, I think the best choice I could make is to stay here. So reluctantly, I went back to my dad. I can't remember if I did it that day or another day later or whatever, but I went back and I said, okay, I'm in. At 45 now, this is what, 23 years ago, 24 years ago it could be. I mean, I look at what my life has become, what I'm doing, the satisfaction that I have, and I think about that dream and I think, how petty, how small, how ridiculous. Didn't feel that way at the time. But I look at what I'm doing today and I'm like, so much more fulfilling. But it all started, and there were actually a few decisions I had to make like that in my life over the course of many years with the church and working with my dad, where I had to come to a crossroads and go, am I going to keep going forward or bail on this? And every time I knew I was supposed to stick it out. But my point is that if I'm thinking purely in terms of self-actualization or following your heart or, living true to myself, I tell my dad to jump in the creek. I'm going to go pursue my dream.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a massive mistake. There's a verse I love in Hebrews 11:8. It says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a land he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, though he did not know where he was going. And I really think that's what it is to follow Jesus. I think you don't know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I've become so convinced of it that I think you can only really understand your life with Jesus in reverse. I'm not sure any of us knows what's happening going forward, because every time you're just like, I have no idea what's happening right now. And then you get to a point where you go, oh, that's what you've been doing this whole time. So that's why we're called to walk by faith and not by sight. It means that there are going to be times where he's going to ask us to make choices that don't feel like they make a ton of sense, but they're going to be the right choice.
All right. I got two things.
Yeah.
First, you said your dreams were small and petty.
Mm-hmm.
Do you say that because they were artistic dreams?
Oh, no.
What do you say?
I think they were self-centered dreams.
Oh.
I look at first let's get something on the table. Musically, I'm limited. I'm limited as a musician and I'm limited as a vocalist. Like I was the lead singer and main guitar player in this band, but I'm not a very good guitar player or singer. So we weren't going to get very far, just us. But what I do have is a strong sense of music. And what was interesting is that out of that decision and what happened for me at the church, so much of my career was wrapped around music. And I did so many things musically that were so satisfying and fulfilling. I look at it and I go, that dream that I laid down, God gave it back to me. So much better though. What I got to do was so fun and really a truer use of my actual gifts instead of a self-centered approach that is, let me make a name for myself. So,
got it.
Yeah.
I like how you said you can look back
and
see it in reverse.
Yeah.
But going non-reverse, going forward, it feels like there just was one step in front of you. Okay, so talk about that.
Yeah, so it's little by little. I think there's no way, and I'm 45 and I've got a lot of life in front of me. And all I'm doing right now is still the same thing that I was doing when I was 19, 20, 21 years old.
Yeah.
I'm just taking the next right step. And who knows? To me, this is the adventure of a lifetime. Like when Jesus said, follow me to the disciples, they had no clue where he was going to take them. No clue. Think of what they saw. Think of what they witnessed. Like the world. Think of all the people. I think about this. Think of all the people that, when it's not COVID, right? They're traveling around, traveling to the Holy Land, traveling to places where people can, they queue up and they line up just to get anywhere near close to the spot where maybe Jesus died. Maybe he was resurrected. Like this might be the place.
Yeah.
They were there. They saw him, knew him, talked with him, spent 3.5 years with him. Yeah. Think of that adventure. Like, what a thing. They had no idea what was coming when they said yes to that call.
To that one step.
That one step. And I think that's how it is following God. It's just like when I say yes to the step in front of me, it's like, you have no idea. So to me, I just think, like, what could be a better adventure than that? What could be more exciting of a life than that? And here's what's great. All the pressure's off. Like, I don't have to make my life be something significant. All I have to do is say yes to what God's put in front of me. Now that takes some effort and some discerning of God's will and some time spent, like figuring out who you are and how God's wired you. And it doesn't mean there's no work in it and that all I do is wake up every day and go, okay, God, what to do today? And then that's how my life goes. I mean, it is just figuring out, trying to discern through friends and community and people that I love and care about me and I care about them, and good godly counsel and mentors, and people can say, hey, like this feels like a good step. Mm-hmm. So I take the step that I feel like God's put in front of me. And it's incredible where that leads. That's what I've found is it's far exceeded my expectations, my wildest dreams.
You're kind of answering the question there, but follow me. Okay. So if Christ is asking us to follow him, just for clarity there, how do I follow him?
I think it means do the next right thing. So a couple of things about that. Chances are, if you're asking yourself this question, you probably have some inkling already of what that next thing you should do is. And that might be have a conversation. That might be go to a church. That might be jump in a small group. That could be a lot of different things. For some of you, it might mean, I don't know, giving a gift financially to a church or to someone. Mm-hmm. And that you like, there's something that maybe it's resigning a job. Maybe it's stepping back from a relationship. Yeah. There's something in you that you go, I know I'm supposed to do that, but I've been putting it off.
Yeah.
So I start there. But the other thing that I would say is don't do that alone. You weren't meant to do it alone. Yes. And I don't actually think we can rightly and clearly discern the will of God well alone.
Yes.
I think we're meant to do this with other people around us. So I have different people, friends. I've got a mentor in my life right now who's helping me kind of figure out my design, how I'm wired up, what I love, what things light me up, what things I don't love doing, so that I can be a more faithful steward. And these are Bible terms, but to better use what I have mm-hmm. and to place my time, energy, resources, passions into things that that I experience make the biggest impact and most difference. So I think that needs to be done in a community. That's why I think the church matters. It's part of why I think the church matters so much.
Yeah.
It's what it's about. It's what a good church should be, more than just showing up and watching a preacher.
I don't do this very often, but I've seen this have such fruit is also a Bible term in my own life, benefits in my own life.
Yeah.
That I will ask this, and I will probably have the same answers. What are some resources? That's like a really Bible term, but I can think of a couple that like I would tell, like you should read this book and you should do this program.
Yeah,
that would help.
Yeah, so I know a couple things come to mind. I know that Tim Keller wrote a book called Every Good Endeavor.
I have read that book so many times. It's one of my favorites.
Have you really?
Oh my gosh.
I've never read it. I've gone through it, but I trust Tim Keller.
Yeah. No, the reason that book is so good, and it was eye-opening to me as someone who grew up in the church, is that it destroys the idea that ministry only happens if you work in a church or if you have a Bible study at lunchtime at your secular, which is not a church job.
Right.
It destroys that idea.
Yeah. So I think that's a great place to start. You could read that book. As far as stewarding your gifts, there's a program here locally, and I don't know how far it reaches.
I think it's
Your One Degree.
Far. Yeah, I think it's pretty far.
Yeah, you could look it up.
You can look it up on Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah. Your One Degree.
Your One Degree.
Yeah. I'm actually going through it right now, and I've done other resources like this. I mean, just knowing my Myers-Briggs, knowing my Enneagram, knowing my strengths, and from the Strengths Finder, knowing I did a life plan, which is another tool that you can kind of figure out. Okay, what are your strengths and weaknesses? How God's wired you up. I think that all those things are helpful to keep you from doing things that you feel obligated to do, but aren't really your call. You're not designed to do. Those will kill you. Those are bad things.
I got a lot of benefit from the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Oh, cool.
As a Christ follower.
Yeah.
That's another one that I would recommend.
Yeah, that's a great book. I have read that.
That's really good. I think sometimes, and maybe this doesn't work because I am a pastor as well, but sometimes you can hear a pastor talk about following God and, especially with your calling, and it can be like, well, they're a pastor, that sort of thing. And so, what does that look like for me? I think one of the most pivotal moments in my life, which we talked about a little bit last season, was I've wanted to write television content for years. It's just been a big passion of mine. And about 5 years ago, I was working at the church and had written a television show and wanted to sell it, and came to you and said, I'm going to move to Los Angeles to follow my dream. And a lot of it, when I would talk about it and think about it, was not super selfish. A lot of it was based around the idea of, this is a gift I feel like I have. I mean, I would like to enjoy this job over here, and I think it would be good. You said, I have some hesitations. I have some reservations. And that was a good red flag. I wasn't getting that a lot. But as I took that moment to pray about it and talk to Diana about it more, we came to a moment, and we had already sold our house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we had sold our house. We had technically quit our jobs. I remember we were in our living room of our house with our boxes packed, and she said, yeah, I'm having some reservations here. And I said, I am too.
Wow.
And so we leaned into it and just said, well, we've heard before, when you don't really know what to do, pause.
Yeah, it's good.
Don't make a big move.
It's good. That's a good idea.
So we didn't. And the next right thing seemed to be ask if we can have our jobs back. And we did. And how quickly they were given back to us, I was like, that feels like a sign. And then a year and a half later, I got a call from a network out in California where we were going to move. Wow. And they said, we're interested in your television show. Would you be interested in coming out and talking to us about it? Wow. It was a new startup streaming service. I did. It was a perfect fit because they wanted me to make it here.
Amazing.
Where all of my friends and resources were.
Yep.
So all of my buddies who had worked on it before were here.
So that so beautifully illustrates, I think, what happens with a lot of people is we have God dreams. We just want to do them at the wrong time. And I think that's the thing. When I talk about that story about music, it's not that God's slapping my hand like, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop even thinking about music. You're terrible at that. You're no good. I've got something else for you to do. Stop it. It wasn't that. I had a legitimate dream and it got used.
Yeah.
It's just that I wanted to do it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And that's what any good parent does. Your kids, as Luna gets older, you'll find she'll come to you with ideas or something she wants to do, but her way of accomplishing it will be crazy.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, yeah, probably not like that, but maybe if we did it like this.
Yeah.
I remember years ago being out in the garage trying to make a skateboard ramp, and my dad, coming up and finding me, and I had no idea what I was doing. And he's like, here, let me help you. Yeah. I see what you're trying to do. Let me help you do this the right way, because you're going to injure yourself.
Yeah.
And because I didn't have any clue how to do it. And I think that's how we often are. It's like we have these impulses, maybe these God-given dreams, but they're we don't exactly know how to make them happen. And I think one of the great things that we could learn is not to force those things. Just to kind of be patient enough to say, man, I remember, I'm the senior pastor of our church now, but man, there was like a period of 2 to 3 years before I transitioned out of my arts role, where I was very much involved in music and other things, that I could tell I was getting to the end of that season.
Yeah.
And I knew there was something else, and I knew I could help in a more significant way at the church. And I knew I had a bigger role. I didn't exactly know how to do that. And I contemplated many times talking to my dad about it and did not. And it wasn't because I didn't have the courage. It was because I knew it wasn't the right time.
Yeah.
My sense was the door will open when the time is right. And it did. Literally, my dad had to kick down the door for me and say, hey, it's time for you to start thinking about something else. It was huge. Yeah, it was awesome. I was so glad that he did.
Yeah.
But I was working on other stuff. And so I was patiently, and maybe I could say content where I was at, going, God, I'm good here. Even, this is wild. When my dad came to me and said, Whit, I think it's time for you to take the church, and this is when it's going to happen. I want to say that was in like March of 2017 was going to happen. He told me it would happen in July. So I might have had maybe April, somewhere in there. I knew, maybe had a few months notice. But when he told me, I remember telling him, yeah, let's talk about it. Maybe I wasn't having cold feet. I was really looking forward to this, but I was content in the season that I was in. And I think that's a good, healthy place to be.
Yeah. What I love about what you just said and how following God will put you in a position where you're like, oh, this is good. After we were done making Pete and Penelope, which was really hard and one of the biggest learning experiences of my life, the pandemic hit.
Wow.
And I was around the church more, and you and I were working together, and you and some of the other team came to me and said, Adam, could you help us make an online kids service?
Which you'd already been doing, essentially.
Which I had been doing.
It was huge.
And all I did was call the guys that made the show with me, and I said, hey, now we're coming over here. We did it like that. Had I moved to L.A., for one, I would have been in L.A. in the pandemic, and I would have been broke with no community. But I wouldn't have had all those people here in Tulsa to help us do this.
That's it.
And that's only following God and taking that next step.
You never know where he's taking you. You can just always trust that it's good.
If I do follow God, if I work really hard to follow God and to fulfill my calling or my purpose, where I end up, or even in every part of the journey, am I going to be happy the whole time?
No, well, not necessarily. I mean, I guess if you're asking, am I going to go to work every day and feel like, this is awesome?
Yeah.
I barely even feel like I'm working. This is so good. No, probably not. We had a question the other day. We did a Q&A at an event, and someone asked, I'm working at a place where I feel like they value me for my job, but not the things I do, but not who I am. And I was just like, well, yeah, welcome to work. I mean, that's what it is. Like, they're paying
and
you.
that was somebody who's younger, right?
Yeah, but I mean, and I get the idea. It's this sort of utopian, like, I'm not going to be happy until I'm working in a place where I feel fully alive and everybody's really appreciating me and I'm completely seen and I get to use my gifts to my fullest. And I'm just like, yeah, that's, we do live in a broken, sinful, fallen world. So I wouldn't want to give anybody the impression that over the course of the last, 25 plus years that I've been working at Church on the Move and the way God's led me in my life, that every bit of that has been pure joy. And I've just had a blast in every season and every stage, felt like I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. There were certainly seasons where I was struggling, and seasons where it wasn't as engaging. But again, in certain seasons where it was really frustrating. But here's the thing: in those seasons, I kept doing the same thing, which was, okay, God, am I meant to leave? Are you trying to get me out of here? And the idea was, or the response was always, and when I say response, just the impression that I had was, no, it's not time to leave. I couldn't visualize any world outside of Church on the Move that made good sense, that seemed like this is where God would lead me.
Yeah.
My dad likes to say a step is something solid on the other end of your foot. And I think, like, when I envisioned what else I could go do, I never got to a place where I could really envision anything solid on the other end of my foot. So I just say, okay, I'm just going to be patient, not make a big decision. And it was crazy that whenever I would do that, maybe not the next day, maybe not even the next week, but there was coming a time, and usually not terribly long, maybe a year, but not like a decade, to where something would break and change and shift. And I'd be like, I'm so glad I didn't bail on this. I'm so glad I stuck with it. Psalm 1 says this, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, or stands in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of the scoffer. His delight will be in the law of the Lord, and in his law he will meditate day and night. And then he says this, and he will be like a tree planted by rivers of water, streams of water. It bears its fruit in its season, and its leaf also shall not wither. And whatever he does will prosper. The idea is that there's this way of living when I'm planted. there's all this talk about pursuing your dreams and chasing this and fulfilling your destiny and all these things. There's not a lot of talk about being planted. And I have found that stability comes from sticking with something long enough to see the fruit from it instead of bailing when it gets difficult.
Yes.
Walking away when I'm frustrated, when I can't see how this makes any sense, to just go, you know what? And I'm going to stick with this. And there's a reward in all of that. That it doesn't mean that God never moves you on. No, it doesn't mean that. I think we're far more apt to value the move, the jump, the shift, change, because we're a change-oriented society, and far less apt to value sticking with something, planting yourself and going, let's see what God does. If I just put in, what if I put in 20 years here? What if I put in 30 years here, 40 years, 50 years? What could happen on the other end of that? And so there's going to be like a marriage. Heather and I have been married 22 years. There's some high seasons and there's some lower seasons.
Yeah.
I think that the benefit is increasing the longer we're together, the closer we get, the more reward, the more fruit, the better it gets. It doesn't always happen just because you stick with something, but I think sticking with something is a key part of seeing fruit come out of it.
I think one of the things that is so interesting about those verses that you mentioned is that trees don't typically bear fruit all year long.
No, they have seasons.
They have seasons.
That's it.
That's the older you get, the more that's helpful to remember.
It's a season of fruitfulness. I talk about this with different people. It's like I'm in a fruitful season or I'm in a pruning season, which is, John 15. Jesus says, "Every branch of me that does bear fruit, my Father prunes so that it will be even more fruitful." Meaning, there's some times in your life where you're getting cut back. It's what you're talking about with Diana.
Yeah. Yes.
She's talking about let's be more fruitful.
And with our time.
Would you give this up in order to do that?
Yep.
Yeah. And those are painful seasons.
They are painful seasons.
So I don't think the promise of God is you'll always be happy. I think the promise is that there's fulfillment, that there's joy. I think that's different than happiness. Happiness is circumstantial. Joy is lasting. Fulfillment is deeper.
Yeah. That's really good. That kind of falls through with what you were saying just about being happy, as you're following God. I was talking to kind of a new friend in ministry today, and he's been in a position at his church that's been really hard. They've had some turnover. COVID has been especially hard on them as a staff. And I said, are you tired? And he said, I am physically tired, but I know this is where I'm supposed to be.
That's a great place to be.
That's a really big deal.
See, knowing that you are where you're supposed to be is more comforting than being happy. And I think we're trading.
Wait, why?
Why? Because it's deeper. Happiness is fleeting. Happiness can come and go. I could be happy right now and miserable in 10 seconds.
That's true.
All depends on what's
that's
going on around me.
Escapism is what you're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so knowing where you're supposed to be, there's this deep sense of things are going to be okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
God's got this. And that's a much more reassuring feeling than happy, oh, wow, I'm having so much fun. I'll take happiness. Don't get me wrong. But I'd rather have that feeling of fulfillment and purpose and knowing that I am where I'm supposed to be far more than just being happy.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of our podcast. Spirit in Motion is a podcast from Church on the Move in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For more information, you can go to churchonthemove.com. We'll see you next time.